Picking up over 100 people already joining us. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We'll give folks just another moment to jump on. All right. As folks continue to stream in, I want to welcome you. I'm Holly Bender, she, her. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Sierra Club, and I am your host for today. I'm going to moderate this really incredible panel of folks. And before I get to the business of introducing our panelists and really orienting us in the moment, I'm going to turn it over to the Sierra Club's Executive Director, Ben Jealous, to really remind us where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go together. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you to everyone who's joining this call. We are at a critical moment in the history of humanity. We are at a critical moment in the history of our country. I want to really express my deep gratitude to everyone who has mobilized in this moment. It takes work, it takes wisdom, it takes wealth, it takes time, it takes talent, it takes treasure. However you're showing up, thank you for showing up. If you're showing up to protest, thank you. If you're writing checks, thank you. If you're one of the 40 or so Sierra Club activists who showed up to lobby on the Hill on a moment's notice, thank you. Even as this terrible bill is moving through the House, and we are working with Leader Schumer and others to figure out ultimately how to kill it, and have it be replaced by something more reasonable, we can celebrate the fact that we got the massive sell-off of public lands that was in it, the massive sell-off in Nevada, in Utah, stripped out of the bill. And that's 100% because we have fought back hard, and we should all take a lot of pride in that. Part of the strategy right now has to be limiting the damage that Trump and his allies can do. We have a moment here to really come together to push back all across the country. I was in a meeting with Leader Schumer last Friday. There's just a few of us talking about this. If you're in a red state, if you're in a purple state, if you're talking to a Republican legislator, what is clear is that the message is about jobs. It's about all the jobs that will be lost if we got this clean energy economy, if we got the EVs. I was with Bill McKibben last night, and it's really we were talking about what a kind of make or break moment this is for the American car industry suddenly, and his fear that one day we will be like Cuba and be that place that just has all those antique cars as we allow China to surge forward in this moment. And while our primary interest is saving the environment, if what the Republicans going to really hear is losing local jobs, please talk about that, because it's all tied together. You are in great hands today with our amazing Chief Program Officer and an incredible team of just other valued colleagues that she will introduce. But I must say, that one of the great joys of my job is getting to work with Holly Bender every day. And she is doing a great job of leading our advocates here of every type, and our organizers here of every type, and our intrepid lawyers as well. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Holly Bender.
Thank you, Ben, for those kind words. And my job is what a joy and a gift to be able to work with the incredibly talented folks on our program team, including some who are here today. So welcome again, everyone. I'll just quickly reintroduce myself. Holly Bender, she, her. I'm the Sierra Club's Chief Program Officer. And today, I have a few hopes for the next 55 minutes or so that we get to spend together. We set up this conversation to really get rooted in what I think is one of the most important, existential, and I think defining moments for our movement that we've been in a long time. Right now in Washington, D.C., Congress is participating in debates over how to put together a budget package. And most people know budgets are actually a reflection of our values. And we're fighting for a process and a plan and a path forward that really protects those things that we treasure and value so much across our Sierra Club community. Access to clean air and clean water, the right to economic self-determination for communities who are building new economies, and especially and importantly for today's conversation, our public lands and the protection and preservation and conservation of our public lands. I just spent a couple of days enjoying Wisconsin's public lands with my family, and I feel gratitude for a long weekend and a renewed just reminder of how special and magical and life altering our experiences on our public lands are. So thank you for being here. I want you to leave today feeling clear that the Sierra Club has a plan, hopeful. And yes, I know hope can sort of feel hard to come by sometimes. I really encourage you to feel and find hope and joy in the work and to find yourself as an activist in this moment. We will invite you to take action and to lift up your voice, to provide resources to the Sierra Club and donate for this all important work that we're doing, lobbying Congress and engaging communities everywhere. And as a reminder to see yourself as an organizer, organizing in your own communities. So, with that, let me introduce our incredible colleagues today, and then I'll get right into the conversation. Mike Scott is with us. Mike Scott is our National Oil and Gas Manager, and Mike will talk a little bit about some of the threats to our public lands, especially for oil and gas giveaways. Dan Ritzman is our director for all of our conservation work. I've had the privilege of working with Dan for, I think, just about every single one of the days that we've both been here for about 18 years. What a joy it is to work with Dan. And Melinda Pierce, our Senior Director for Federal Lobbying and Advocacy, who's going to share all of her wisdom working on the Hill and really the bright spots and the challenges and work ahead for us. So with that, I'm going to jump right into our panel. Welcome for folks who are just joining. So, Melinda, I'm going to tee up the first question for you and just get us oriented to the moment and the opportunity. Can you explain a little bit more about the process behind what folks are hearing about with budget reconciliation and what this piece of legislation really is and our opportunities to influence it?
You bet. Thanks, Holly. Hope you can hear me. I'm Melinda Pierce. I'm the legislative director, essentially. I've been with the Sierra Club for more than 25 years. I'm based in Washington, D.C. And in that perch, while President Trump and Elon Musk and Doge, et cetera, has moved swiftly to dismantle our federal government, whether that's through halting government funding for critical programs or firing federal experts, to win much of the Trump agenda, however, it's going to require Congress. And that's why we have seen this massive push to advance Trump's big, beautiful bill through the budget reconciliation process that Holly mentions, and it's been happening this spring. Now, the Republicans are using the budget reconciliation process for strategic reasons. It allows them to overcome the hurdle of an anticipated filibuster in the Senate. So instead of needing 60 votes to pass Trump's big budget bill, Republican leadership in the Senate only needs a simple majority. And as you know, there are 53 Republicans in the Senate, but that margin is tight. So where are we in the budget process? As Ben mentioned, the Republican leadership muscled through Trump's big bill through the House last week. After debating throughout the night, the House finally passed its disastrous bill, and it's now teed up for Senate action. This budget package is extreme. It makes draconian cuts to things like funding for Medicaid, food assistance, et cetera. In the climate space, the bill represents a near total repeal of the historic clean energy investments that we passed under Biden. It ends tax credits for clean energy manufacturing and for the deployment of wind and solar and battery technologies. And it ends consumer incentives for the purchases of EVs, as Ben mentions, or the installation of rooftop solar. And importantly for our discussion today, the bill opens up vast swaths of our public lands and waters to oil and gas leasing and development. It sells off, it sells out some of our most iconic public lands, whether that's the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska or the Boundary Waters in Minnesota, all to pay for tax cuts for the billionaires and increased profit for corporate polluters. But as Holly says, the fight isn't over. In the House, the bill actually barely squeaked by. After tortured backroom deals to secure passage, it passed by a single vote, 215 to 214. And as I said, the action now moves to the Senate. It's expected to take up the bill next week when they return from recess, with the goal of passing it before the July 4th recess. So we have about 3 weeks for advocacy, 3 weeks to fight. The good news here on the Senate side is many senators have already made clear they want changes to the bill. There are moderates who want to ease a tax on Medicaid. They've been out there vocal. There are fiscal conservatives who want to do more to tackle the deficit. And in our space, there's a cadre of Republicans already out there, including Senator Murkowski of Alaska, Tillis of North Carolina, Curtis of Utah, and Collins of Maine. So across the country, they object to the provisions to gut clean energy. And that's just on the clean energy side of the agenda. But we're part of the narrative, part of what's going to have to change. This bill will have to change, and we will fight to protect our clean energy, protect our conservation priorities during the debate. But it also means significantly that this new amended bill will have to go back to the House, where any of the changes that we win on the Senate side could throw off that delicate balance it took to pass the House version by a single vote. House wants it worse, Senate wants it quote unquote better. That isn't a recipe for both to pass a single text, and we're going to lean into that chaos. So this isn't over. Every fight matters, every change matters. And with these narrow margins, every vote matters. And so our lobbying, your advocacy matters. And Holly, I'm happy to speak a little later in the call about our clean energy advocacy. We really leaned into about 20 plus Republican districts that really benefited from the clean energy investments. And they were vocal, they advocated to change. But in the end, none of those moderates who cared about clean energy said that they would vote no on the bill if their demands weren't met. In contrast, however, we did have a win on public lands and on the House side that was different. And I'll let Dan speak to that in his presentation.
Amazing. Thank you for that perfect tee up, Melinda. I think you said so clearly. We have 3 weeks, folks, 3 really important, consequential weeks. And if you live in Maine, Alaska, North Carolina, or Utah in particular, but really every vote matters. I want to reinforce that. There's so much work that every single one of us can do at this stage. And so Mike and Dan are going to help us really understand more fully what's at stake. So over to you, Mike. Can you tell us a little bit more really about what's at stake and what makes this bill potentially so destructive?
Sure. And hey, everybody, and thanks for joining. My name is Mike Scott. As was said earlier, I'm the oil and gas campaign manager for the Sierra Club, use he, him pronouns, and I'm based in Livingston, Montana, right in the heart of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So it's really hard to overstate the impacts of this legislation. And I'm afraid we don't have time in this call, like not even an hour is not enough to cover all of the bad things that this bill does. But I do want to give you some highlights of what we're looking at because I think it's really important to grasp what we're facing. First, there is mandated leasing of public lands to oil and gas companies. This bill will require the government to hold for-lease sales in places like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Mandated lease sales in the refuge would have a devastating impact on this fragile ecosystem, as well as the Gwich'in tribe, a partner that we work with, their ability to continue to exist on their homelands. There's mandated offshore leasing in the Gulf of Mexico. Again, this is a huge threat to the Gulf ecosystem and to the communities in the region. And if that is not enough for you, it will also require lease sales everywhere that lands are deemed available under the Mineral Leasing Act. Um, in practice, this means you're going to be looking at quarterly lease sales in every Western state, as well as any other state where the federal government owns mineral resources. There's situations called split estate where the federal government owns the subsurface rights and somebody else owns the surface. Those lands are all going to be up for grabs. Um, that's going to mean a lot more drill rigs, a lot more roads on our public lands, and a lot more possibilities for disasters and pollution. The bill also includes a provision that is really egregious that we're calling pay to pollute. Uh, this provision is going to allow companies to pay for an expedited environmental review, right? So basically, it says that if the company is willing to pay 125% of the estimated cost of an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement, they're going to have that process guaranteed to be expedited. So it will be done. If it's an EA, it'll be done in 6 months. If it's an EIS, it'll be done in a year. These tight timelines are effectively going to eliminate our abilities to really engage in the public process and provide that critical input on these very important environmental decisions. These are the public comment periods that our members rely on to shape the decisions that are being made in their communities. And you get action alerts about these all the time if you're on our list. It also may impact our ability to use the courts. There are provisions in this that say it will eliminate judicial review processes. So that threatens our ability to sue once these decisions have been made. And I think, for any of you guys who have been involved in the Sierra Club for a while, you know that the courts are a critical component of our ability to self-govern and our ability to protect our communities and protect our public lands. Um, so, I mean, these things alone are just a huge threat. The mandated lease sales could lead to some of our most treasured landscapes, whether those be iconic places like the Arctic Refuge or that perfect little piece of BLM that you found that you've been camping on for decades, to be handed over to the oil and gas industry for pennies. Um, these lands will end up developed in wells, covered in roads, subject to toxic spills that will affect people and wildlife for decades. Cutting us out of the public process and attempting to stop our ability to use the courts to enforce laws are going to make our communities less safe and our ecosystems less stable. Bottom line is this bill will affect everybody. Um, we are focusing on a few key components of the bill from our campaign. We're currently focused on the places we think we can win. Those places are things like cutting the Arctic Refuge out of the legislation, stopping these attacks on the public process from going through. And then there's smaller components of it too that I haven't really gotten into here, but there's things like royalty rate reductions that cut the amount of money oil and gas companies pay that we think we can win on. Um, I think it's really important to acknowledge, though, we have done this before. We have won on a lot of these fights before, and with our members and donors, we can win again. So back to you, Holly.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so glad you mentioned this pay to pollute scheme that is so dangerous. Not only are just the important work of protecting the Arctic Refuge and other sensitive ecosystems that would be devastated by expanded oil and gas drilling. This slippery slope of, enough money gets you sort of a final sign off without public input. That one of the sort of core values I think we really share here is that public engagement makes projects better. And skipping over that is so worrisome to me, and I'm sure to many folks who are listening in. So thank you for lifting that up. And I think you also really teed it up perfectly to go to Dan. We've been here before. We have won on these issues before. Again, my invitation to feel hope and feel rooted in our strategy. Dan, especially for folks who are contributing financial resources to our organization and others to stand up and push back. how are we using those resources? We've been successful, we know what to do, but I think you have such a great grounding in our strategies and tactics and how we're focusing right now.
Great. Thanks, Holly. So again, yeah, I'm Dan Ritzman. I use he, him pronouns. I direct our conservation work, and I am calling in from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Holly, I love that question, right? It's what are we doing and how are we going to win? And to me, the answer is pretty simple. It's a lot of hard work, but it's a simple answer. And it's my favorite answer about the Sierra Club. And that is people-powered conservation. That is how the Sierra Club has won on these issues, has moved conservation forward, and that's how we're going to keep on winning. And so, as Melinda said earlier, the margins for passing this bill in the House and Senate are razor thin. And the Republicans know they can't lose any votes. So the way that we protect these special places and remove them from the legislation is strategic organizing to convince senators that it's in their political self-interest to oppose including the Arctic Refuge, including other drilling, including polluter pay to play in the reconciliation bill. So again, the way that we stop this is that we demonstrate that votes for these provisions are out of line with the views of their constituents. It's straight up democracy, and that's how we get things done. And that's what I love about doing this work is we're a democracy organization. So the Sierra Club, as a people-powered organization with a presence in every state, we're uniquely positioned to do that, to demonstrate that supporting this bill is politically damaging. We're using messengers and messages that resonate within these districts, within these states, whether it's faith-based leaders, sportsmen, businesses are a big one. We heard from Ben around the economy. We're doing a lot of organizing with local businesses outside of these special areas. And we're looking for wedges to move this forward. Again, you heard earlier that the reconciliation process is now moving through the Senate. We have 3 weeks to do it. So we are going to be pushing on these senators every step of the way. Behind the scenes, we'll be actively engaging members, our members in-person via email and in-person organizing. We're going to be, our organizers and strategists are going to be out there hosting and setting up visibility events in the district. We're going to be bringing local voices to their district offices. And we're going to be bringing people back to Washington, D.C. to deliver this message in person. That's what makes the Sierra Club strong, is that we can do this work from on the ground in the districts, in the regions, and in Washington, D.C. as well, with Melinda's great team back there. So we have 3.2 million members. We have strong chapter network. And we're unique in that sense that we're everywhere, and legislators know that, so they listen to the Sierra Club. We've got this proven grassroots strategy that brings together our members, our chapters, our volunteers, connects them through our national organizing efforts. We amplify their voices with our communications and digital teams, and we're out there generating this media coverage, talking about the importance of these special places and continuing to push on members of Congress, whether, again, that's through these events or letters to the editor. We need all folks to be as visible and vocal as possible. And we need every senator to hear from us. They need to know that the voters are watching this process unfold. And how do we know that this is going to work? Well, we've done it before, and I think a few folks have mentioned that in this call. We've done this in previous administrations to protect the Arctic Refuge. And in fact, we did this just last week to strip those disastrous public lands sell-off provisions out of the House version of the reconciliation bill. So that House bill, it had provisions, I think, as Ben mentioned, that would sell off hundreds of thousands of acres in Nevada and Utah. Some of those acres were popular trailheads. Some of those acres were protected areas and adjacent to protected areas. And we all came together to strip those provisions out of the bill. And this started way back in January, before there was even a bill. We knew that there was going to be a tax on these public lands. We organized grassroots pressure. through public rallies, through phone banks, through visibility at town halls. We even had members of Congress stopping their town halls because so many people were showing up to these things. We organized, we demonstrated this care, that constituents care for public lands. And we had these moderate Republicans, I'm going to put quotes or air quotes around the moderate Republicans, maybe calling themselves champions, or maybe better word is supporters of public lands. And they came together and announced that they were going to be supporters of public lands and not interested in these sell-offs. Well, then along came the reconciliation bill that had, in the middle of the night, Republicans slipped in a provision that would sell off these acres in Utah and Nevada. And the grassroots got going, and they got out there, and we started talking and contacting these members of Congress, telling them that those provisions were in there, telling them that they said they cared about public lands, and that their supporters don't want to see that. And we ramped it up with more phone calls in the district offices, more phone calls into the DC office, letters to the editor, visibility events in the district. And this all came together 2 weeks ago, the week before the final vote in the House. In the Sierra Club, we had 20 activists in Washington, DC, up on the Hill, meeting with these offices, telling them that their constituents didn't want to see public land sell-off in this reconciliation bill. At the same time, we had actions back in the district, press conferences and events in the states, in Nevada and other states, saying the same thing. And this 1-2 punch was enough to move a handful of congresspeople to go to House Republican leadership and tell them they needed to take the public land sell-off out of the bill, which they did. That was a huge victory and a big momentum builder. And we need to ride that momentum into the Senate and address these other terrible provisions in this legislation. We've done this before, and we're going to do it again. We need to apply as much pressure as possible over these next 3 weeks so that legislators understand these provisions are not politically popular. And so, yeah, we need all of your support. We're here, talking about what we need, the additional resources to do these fly-ins, to do these chapter in district events, to get visibility out there and messages into these members of Congress, whether that's through billboards or digital ads or ads in a newspaper, old school ways, and phone banking and calling, all of that. So thanks for your support, for showing up, and we're going to win again.
Heck yeah. If you have ever wondered if your action matters, signing a petition, making a phone call, writing a letter, going to Washington, D.C., going to your local member of Congress's office in your community, and whether any of that makes a difference, I hope that listening to Dan and Mike and Melinda have erased any doubts that you might have and reminded you of the power of each individual on this call, and more importantly, the power we have collectively. What did you say, Dan? Your favorite thing about the Sierra Club and to say about the Sierra Club is that we are a people-powered organization, and that could not be more true. So thank you for just spelling out all of the ways in which that actually goes into winning. And for those of you who have volunteered and also made financial contributions, continue to support us as members, I hope that you are confident that every dollar is going towards winning this hard-fought, critical work. It is honestly is such an absolute privilege to be able to work at this organization at this moment on issues that matter so much to me and to all of you. So thank you for being here. We have some really great questions that have been submitted by you all. And so I'm going to invite all of our panelists to share answers to some of those questions that many of you have already submitted. The first one is going to come to you, Dan. How does this connect, this work on the budget and the work that we've just described happening in Congress, in communities, lifting up our stories? How does it connect to the Sierra Club's larger strategy? And what if my issue is wildlife? What if my issue is national parks? Call me in, talk me into like how this all fits together.
Great. Thanks, Holly. Yeah, again, I love that question. I'm going to sound like a broken record, right? But we're the Sierra Club, and it's the people power and our energy together that's how we're going to win on all of our conservation issues, all of our issues writ large. So it's not just the Arctic and the reconciliation bill, but it's whether it's the attacks to the Endangered Species Act or threats to the Antiquities Act, or whether it's threats to national monuments and national parks themselves. We're going to win with coming together, raising our voices, amplifying our voices, and directing them to the key decision makers. So Congress is going to play a big role in this going on, or members of Congress, whether that is, we know we're going to see more attacks on things we hold near and dear come through Congress, whether that's dismantling the Endangered Species Act, our nation's most important wildlife legislation, or whether that would be delisting grizzly bears through Congress. So again, what we just described, this local organizing, the 1-2 punch of local organizing and delivering it in DC, will make a critical difference in those fights when those things come up. And then even in other instances like the dismantling of national monuments, it's still a similar sort of tactic, because I think about it like, okay, Doug Burgum, who's the Secretary of Interior, not a fan of national monuments, and we're going to spend time, we're going to tell him that he shouldn't be dismantling those national monuments. But who has more sway with Doug Burgum and with the president is these moderate Republicans who think that they want to win. We don't want them to win again in 26, but they want to win again in 26. And they're going to say, hey, I'm not going to be able to win if my constituents see you all out there dismantling our precious public lands, national parks and national monuments. So again, we're going to talk to those decision makers in DC who have the ear of the president and the administration, and we're going to pressure them to tell them not to do those, not to attack our public lands.
Perfect. What a great reminder that at the root of our organization is this idea that organized people is what we stand for. And it's the durability of our movement and our organization to tackle today's issues that we're talking about, but to be ready, prepared, and powerful for what comes next, for all the things we care about. That are part of this bill and ideal, almost certainly, part of the next suite of issues that we're dealing with. Melinda, it does feel like everything in Congress is divided. Folks are calling in from all over the country. So how can Sierra Club have an impact that really cuts across the aisle, so to speak, in Washington?
I'm not gonna lie. It's pretty rough out there. It was, when Dan uses the air quotes around moderate Republicans, truly there are fewer moderate Republicans, and that's because of the polarization and folks really falling in behind the force that is Donald Trump. And yet, all of these representatives represent their district. They have to represent, all of the constituents whose votes they'll need. And then they all have specific parochial interests that cut beyond politics. So they care about jobs. They care about jobs in their district and community development. So that might mean they care about the clean energy incentives that brought the battery manufacturing facility to their really red district. Everyone needs to be responsive to rising consumer costs in this context. So if clean energy is cheaper and faster, and we are approaching a very hot summer, leaning into the impacts of what Congress is doing or Trump's doing that can raise consumer costs is a way to reach across the divide and have a common interest. And then on conservation, so many Republicans care about the places close to home. And so Ryan Zinke, arch conservative from Montana, cares about public lands in Montana, and people let him know they care about public lands in Montana. And he was absolutely instrumental, saying he would vote against the whole bill if this public land sell-off in Nevada and Utah wasn't removed. So it's really finding where the areas of agreement are, as a way to make connections with members of Congress, even if they're on the other side of the aisle. And frankly, we're having to figure out all the tricks and new ways, because that's where the playing field is. When they're, on the narrow majority, we have to be playing in some of these Republican districts and splinter them off of the Trump agenda.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you for mentioning affordability. I mean, we are talking a lot about public lands and the threats to our conservation work, just these important places, and also these slippery slopes around public participation. But at the core of a lot of what we're seeing on clean energy is really a potentially devastating rollback of tax incentives and investments in technologies and economies that will really power our country forward. And for also mentioning that so many of those investments are in Republican districts, just as a really real life reminder that this is not a Republican or Democrat moment, that there really are opportunities to mobilize across these issues that hopefully we can find common ground and all care about deeply. Mike, I don't think I've ever said this to you directly. I love hearing you talk about campaign strategy. You have such a just thoughtful and sophisticated approach to how we do our work at the Sierra Club. And so I'm really delighted to send the next question to you, which is, besides donating to the organization, how can we activate people in this moment to take action with us?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, and thank you for that question. Um, we'll drop some links in the chat here, but I think first and foremost is to remember to be engaged. It is easy to just deal with the fire hose of information we are all getting through our phones and social media. And sometimes it can just be overwhelming and kind of put people in a freeze moment. So remember, engage, first of all. But in terms of like how to do this, as we work through this bill, the first thing I would do is encourage everybody to get plugged into your local chapters. Your local chapters are going to be facilitating the local actions. I think from a strategic perspective, it's easy for us to talk about this big picture stuff, right? Like when we talk about how we're messaging things in DC, but like you in your states and your chapters in your states know your state's culture, knows the political landscape, and knows how to talk to your delegation about the issues we're dealing with. And as Melinda was pointing out, every one of these people in Congress has their own set of pet interests, their own sensitivities, their own special interest groups that they're interested in. They're all going to have unique avenues of approach. And so keep that in mind and plug in with your local chapter, learn about what those are. And through that, you can figure out the best ways to bring your concerns to your delegation. Second, I would say this is one we oftentimes overlook, but talk to your friends in your communities that you're in. Tell them why you care about this bill, what is in this bill, and help walk them through how to take action. I think a lot of times if you're involved in an organization like Sierra Club, you kind of take for granted that it becomes easy to send an email. It becomes easy to pick up that phone. But for a lot of people, that is a huge step. A lot of times on these webinars, we will actively like pause the webinar and all call in together at the same time. And then debrief what that was like when we have a lot of people who are new on this stuff. So you can do that with your friends, with your communities, walk them through how to take action, talk about what the experience was like, and then ask them to do something else like we always do. Obviously, big picture one, tell your senators why protecting the environment and public health programs matter to you. You can call them at 1-844-672-5067, and we'll put that in the chat. That'll get you to the switchboard, and you can call them and leave a message about why this is important to you. They need to be hearing from you right now. You can also demand that they take action to stop this bill by writing a message online. We'll put a link in here in a second that'll help you draft a message. It'll give you a template on how to do this. But you can write a letter right now to them online, or you can write that to your local media and kind of publicly lay out the case that you're making to them in order to influence them. So there's a lot of easy actions we can take right now that actually matter. I would say, taking your own actions and then getting your friends and communities to act are probably the most important ones that are really accessible to you right now. So I'm going to drop some of these links in that I referred to and kick it back to you, Holly.
Okay, that was incredible. No surprise. And Mike just gave everybody a lot of options, right? Think of yourself as an organizer, talk to your family, your friends, your community. Just this morning, I overheard a conversation that I was no part of. Somebody saying, "Hey, I just got a bid to go solar and I'm doing it now because I'm worried about the future of the tax credits." And then these people high-fived, and it was both a heartwarming moment and just reminded me what's at stake, the opportunity for people to continue to make this kind of progress, make these kinds of investments. So talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, call your member of Congress. And thank you to Sarah, who is our Sierra Club host for the webinar, who is putting these numbers and links. Mike gave you the number. It's now in the chat. And reach out to your local Sierra Club chapter. If you're less familiar with the Sierra Club, we have more than 60 chapters across the country, several in the state of California alone. These are the folks who are really deeply rooted in community and local action, all part of our big national organization and working towards our shared goals. So please connect with those folks. I have one last question that's a little bit of I'll just kick it out to the group actually and just see who wants to jump in. Dan, you did talk about the power of our communications work earlier, so you may have a sense of this. So that last question from our participants was, how can we get more of the public to know and act on these issues? How can we pass the message along to our participants? Anybody have thoughts about that?
I'll jump in and I'll start, I think, just by restating or amplifying what Mike said earlier too, like that if you're out there and you care about these issues in these places, and you see something come up, whether it's a rally or you see that your member of Congress is back in the district and they're having a town hall, we're all getting those emails and text messages on our phones from our elected officials telling us what's up. And I think the way that you can get more people involved is by you being involved and inviting your friends. I think that's one real way to do it. Like when you're going to that town hall, invite your two best friends and have them come along with you. And I think that is how a movement grows, is people get involved, they see that their involvement makes a difference, and they'll bring more people. That's how I got involved in this movement way too long ago, was getting out there, having somebody invite me along on something and see that my voice made a difference, and the power of the democracy still exists and matters, and to share that voices. So I think that's a big one. I think using your own access to the media, newspapers still have letters to the editor. You can put your voice out there. Those do matter. When there is a letter to the editor that mentions a member of Congress or a particular issue, the staff for that elected official is reading those newspapers every day. They're reading them online. They're clipping those out. They're telling their boss what people are saying. So your voice does matter. Getting that out there and inviting more of your friends and that your community to be engaged is how I'd answer that. And see if Melinda or Mike have more to say.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. Dan, you said a lot of what I would say, right? And, I started this work as an organizer like 17 years ago. And organizing, we talk about it in a lot of complex ways, but really all it is meeting people, asking them to come, having them show up, saying, wasn't that cool? Let's do it again, right? Like, we don't have to overthink this stuff. Everybody here can be an organizer in their own space. But I would also say you all are the best spokespeople for your own interests. Nobody will represent your interests better than you. And uh, because that is so real, when you put your own personalized messages into the people who are making decisions, that comes through and it matters. We hear all the time from, whether they be people who run agencies or people in Congress, personalized messages really do matter to them. And so, we overlook a lot of these old things we used to do, a lot of like handwritten letters or actual phone calls instead of a Facebook post. But I would encourage folks to really, really get personal about this. Pick up a pen, pick up a piece of paper, write a handwritten letter, make that phone call, tell them who you are and why this actually matters to you. It's okay to get off the talking points sometimes, to really tell your own authentic story. And that can have a huge impact. So, I would say like just be your own advocate as you engage in the public process through this legislation. That's all.
So good. Melinda, anything you want to add? I love that, Mike. And I often remind people, especially if I'm speaking with a group of young people, it applies everywhere. If you're an artist, there is a role for you to play. If you're a teacher, an educator, an elected official, if you're thinking about your role as a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, and just really any identity that feels core to who you are, there are ways to connect it to this issue, and the most powerful way to meet to for people to hear you is to speak directly from that really authentic place. So, Mike, I thought that was really brilliant. Dan, thank you for reminding us how we're doing it. I am about to close us out, and so I'm going to do that. Which is first really taking a moment to appreciate everybody who's joining, who's active now, will hopefully take action after this webinar. So thank you for being here, and thank you to Mike, Dan, and Melinda, incredible colleagues, and just leading the charge on this work. So I have one final request of all of you, which is to share one specific concrete action that everyone listening can take. And then we'll close out. Melinda, I'm going to go to you first.
No, because we're in the heat of the battle, and every vote counts. And so all advocacy counts. We're going into a Senate battle. Call your senator, tell them to oppose these clean energy cuts and public land sell-off. And it's going to have to go back to the House. So call your representative. So it is, make your voice heard in Congress. It's toll free. Do it. Thank you.
All right, folks, you heard it. Schedule call time. Senators and reps, make it happen. Put it on your calendar. Mike, what's your specific action?
I've got an easy one. Everybody look in the chat right now. I just put a link in there. That link will take you to an action page to protect the Arctic Refuge and take the mandated leasing out of the bill. That message is going to go to your senators and your representative. So click on that link and take action.
Fantastic. Easy to do. Move your cursor, click the link, fill out the form, and hit send. Dan, what's your one action?
I'm going to say organize with your friends and neighbors with your local Sierra Club chapter. So you saw the links earlier, and we'll put it in the chat again. Reach out, get involved with your chapters, bring your friends and neighbors. You care about these things, that chapter can help you get organized, direct your energy towards the key decision makers, and we're gonna win on these issues.
Fantastic. You heard it from Dan. Connect, organize, talk to people. And I'll just add in, folks may not be familiar that doing this very specific work, targeting members of Congress and lobbying takes a very specific type of resources. And they are so, so valuable to the Sierra Club. We have a link that will specifically allow participants to donate C4 funding to the organization that allows us to do all of the things that Melinda and Dan and Mike talked about, the fly-ins, the call-ins, all of the ways in which we're lifting up your voices, taking those personalized stories and bringing them to decision makers, making phone calls. I could go on, but you've already heard it from folks. So please do, if you are able, donate to the Sierra Club, donate these precious C4 resources that will allow us to be all in for the next 3 weeks and beyond. Thank you again, everyone, to our incredible panelists, Melinda, Dan, and Mike. I am grateful for you today and every day. Thank you to Sarah, who is our Sierra Club host behind the scenes, sharing links and information. And more than anything, thank you to you all for your continued engagement, investment, and taking action with the Sierra Club. We literally cannot do any of this without you. So thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll stay in the fight. See you soon.